Legendary game designer Shigeru Miyamoto once supposedly said, "A delayed game is eventually good. A rushed game is forever bad." This quote was quite popular amongst the gaming sphere for reasons I've never quite understood. Not just because it's recently come out that it's unlikely Miyamoto said it, which should have been obvious since he doesn't speak English, guys, come on. And not just because some of the greatest games of all time have notorious stories around being rushed, and no game is ever truly finished, but because it started to become popular around the time Duke Nukem Forever released, the game that took 14 years to disgrace us with its presence. When I was making my video on why Street Fighter 2 is the greatest video game sequel ever made, naturally I was curious what the worst sequel was, and it didn't take a lot of digging to notice that Duke Nukem Forever either topped worst game ever lists or made the top 3 repeatedly. It seemingly killed off the franchise and made Duke Nukem a laughingstock, or perhaps even worse, irrelevant, which even the likes of Devil May Cry 2 didn't manage to do to its franchise. But if I were going to declare Duke Nukem Forever, hereafter referred to as DNF, the worst video game sequel ever, I should at least give it the courtesy of playing it, I unfortunately thought to myself. So enjoy this playthrough, in which my brain is slowly dragged down to its level. DNF starts as it means to go on, with Duke pissing about. He's being called up to deal with a cycloid. After drawing your amazing battle plan on the whiteboard, or not drawing anything since it doesn't make a difference, an EDF soldier declares it brilliant and says if they'd done what you drew, that guy would still have his arm, whilst pointing to 2 guys, both of whom still have their arms. Now, initially, you might give the benefit of the doubt and think this is a joke. Not the best joke, but surely it would make more sense than them not having the time to remove the arm from a model. Believe me when I say assuming they didn't have time to do something is the likely outcome. That may sound absurd when this game took 14 years to make, but it makes sense when you think of it not as one 14-year development cycle, but 14 one-year development cycles, and this game is just the final one they rushed out. One signifier of the quality of a sequel is if it builds upon the previous game. This kind of improvement could be shown by, for example, doing the final battle of the previous 2.5D game as the intro fight to the new game, but doing it in proper 3D. But that only works if the new version is better. You can just circle strafe him from a long distance whilst dodging his blatantly telegraphed attacks. And, unfortunately, if you throw in the occasional break to take cover and recover health, you've learnt all the strategy and tactics you'll need to complete the real game, because it turns out that was a game within the game that Duke was playing whilst getting an implied mouth sandwich from twins in schoolgirl outfits. He says the game is good, but after 12 years it better be. A hilarious meta-reference which isn't even correct. It had the official Guinness World Record for longest development for a video game that says it took 14 years and 43 days to make, only recently passed by Beyond Good and Evil 2. But even as a joke, it feels like it could have worked but just doesn't. Probably because none of this has an air of irony about it. Getting doubled up on by twins is like a 13-year-old boy in 2005's idea of the coolest thing ever. As a parody, it could have been funny, but parody requires intelligent writing, so instead it comes across as a pathetic ego trip. Like if the Deadpool movies were made based on the ones you see at conventions. The twins are called the Hallucination twins. Now, if you're what the internet considers old, aka over 30, you may know what that's a reference to. Also, make sure to do your lower back exercises today. If you're not old enough to know, it's a reference to the Olsen twins, former actresses turned fashion designers. Let's just run some numbers here. DNF started development in 1997, when the Olsen twins were 11, and they turned 18 in 2004. So if the Hallucination twins were added before then, this was meant to be a sexualized reference to children. On the other hand, the Olsen twins stopped appearing in media as a duo in 2004, and DNF released in 2011, meaning they kept an already 7-year-old reference in the game. So which is it? Bad touch or out of touch? Anyway, turns out a full-on alien invasion is happening, so you play some pool and make your way through Duke's studio, mansion, casino complex to reach the Duke Cave. On the way you can enjoy sights like this room full of people who just learnt aliens are invading, choosing to watch 2 guys playing air hockey, with no one talking and just the ticking of a clock. Intentional humour or lack of time? Hard to tell, which will be a running theme. Also, not only does that clock move, it's set to the actual time. It was 11:57 PM when I was playing this, and the clock is showing that. What a bizarre level of detail for an otherwise rushed game. Then there's some more people transfixed by air hockey. These clothes hangers can be moved. This is a weird game. You may have also noticed how blurry the game seems. Turns out there's a cinematic filter that you can turn off in the options to make the game not look like shit. Well, okay, it'll still look like a brown smudge. This is an FPS from the PS360 era after all, but it won't be a blurry brown smudge. What kind of logic is it to have a make the game look worse filter on by default? Why would you have that filter at all? A kid asked Duke to autograph his book, and you can't choose not to. They've locked the doors and put up invisible walls to stop you getting past. You will experience the interaction that took at least a lunch break to come up with. They won't let you leave. Even after signing the book, their eyes follow you, judging you. There. A talk show host starts having a tantrum and you can't avoid it because they put up another invisible wall, so you can only see the NPC still head tracking you. There's tons of this forced linearity throughout. You never get to experience the satisfaction of clearing a level and getting to go back through it while it's empty, because you're forced to keep moving forward. Although it's also a blessing because you'll quickly learn there's no point in trying to explore. If you're presented with two paths, one is the correct way and the other is a dead end. There are no secrets. The game does not hide anything from you. It's upfront about being terrible and you only have yourself to blame for continuing to play it. Your reward for exploring in Duke Nukem 3D was extra weapons and armour, maybe even finding the You Shouldn't Be Here Easter egg. Your reward in DNF is a reminder that you're wasting your time. You walk in on an actor berating a stagehand, which is a reference to a viral rant Christian Bale went on in 2009.
Oh, good for you! And how was it?
We're done professionally, man. You're a nice guy. You're a nice guy. But you don't get it. Fuck!
I considered making a list of references people may not get because they were barely relevant at the time and will have aged badly. But that list would have been depressingly long and incomplete because there's certainly references that I didn't get. Is this guy with a 42 jersey who's just here for some reason a reference, or the kind of lol so random humour from the time? Is this moment where Duke pervs on some sunbathing women with a shark hanging above them a reference, or just Duke being a perv? Without context, it's just confusing. That said, being able to punch out the actor got a genuine laugh out of me. One of only 3 laughs throughout the game if you were wondering how well the humour lands when playing. Didn't let me punch the stagehand though. Or this guy sitting on the throne that takes me to the Duke cave. I have to take his picture for him. Why would Duke go through with this? You reach the Duke cave where the President and General Graves are telling you not to get involved because you're a liability, and the aliens are seeking peace. You're just a relic of a bygone era. Oh, dare I get my hopes up? What an interesting possible road the story could go down. So of course it turns out Duke should get involved because the President is just trying to be king of the ashes after the aliens invade, which makes all of Duke's idiotic actions going forward justified. Hooray, head empty, no depth. Woo. You keep moving through what I think is still supposed to be part of Duke's mansion and rip a door open rather than getting a keycard, because obviously exploring for keycards isn't fun. Or, more accurately, making levels that are fun to explore takes time, so just go down endless corridors instead. After all, keycards are an outdated concept. That's why Doom 2016 still has keycards and was a commercial and critical flop that no one liked and proved that reviving an old FPS with modern sensibilities couldn't be done. Time has not done DNF any favours. 3 years after it released, Wolfenstein The New Order showed that you could revive these old FPS franchises, although it took Wolfenstein a couple tries. But then Doom 2016 came along and showed that not only could they be revived, but thrive if you just get a guy to make an insane soundtrack for it. But Doom didn't have an ego bar, which is Duke's health bar in this game, and can be increased by doing manly things like playing pool, making popcorn, and bench pressing. Bench pressing to show how tough he is something you could get away with at the time, but it's outdated now. It's from a time before the average person had a home gym, lived at the gym, lived in leisurewear, and the term muscle mommy was strange and confusing rather than strange and comforting. As much as you'd think there's no time to waste with aliens invading, there's always time for pinball, because when he loses, Duke says,
I've got balls of fail.
I have to believe this game was rushed out because either this was the first draft you hope never sees the light of day, or it was the final draft that they thought was worthy of a full-priced release with lines like,
Duke, stop playing with your balls.
The mechanics of the pinball minigame are also undercooked. I didn't expect a full-blown detail simulation to rival the real thing, but the ball physics, which you'd think would be the fundamental part of a pinball minigame you'd put all your focus into and only include such a minigame if you got it right, are wrong. The ball's too floaty. I know game development isn't as simple as copy-pasting what another game did, but Space Cadet managed to get this perfect 16 years before DNF released. Yes, I am also old, that's why I know to do lower back exercises. Fun fact, pinball machines only had flippers added to them in 1947, before which the ball would simply come back down without you being able to do anything about it. As much as it makes it an actual game, I think adding flippers has been an overall net negative to the happiness of the world, just because of the added time it meant people played this minigame. You get given access to Duke Vision, which I believe is meant to be a reference to Arkham Asylum's Bat Vision, except it's vital later on, so what's the joke? You're mocking a game mechanic but then using it. There's quite a lot of extra mechanics like this, such as this RC minigame. Thinking about it, I don't even think you spend the majority of this first-person shooter doing some shooting. Just minigames, vehicle sections, and NPCs yammering at you. After far too many corridor shootouts using the cover and shoot technique, you make your way to the roof to start a turret section. It's about as dull as you'd expect, and they play it straight as though a turret section isn't mock-worthy. If they wanted to mock modern games of the time, you would start with a turret section, then Duke would go, "This sucks," rip it out and walk around with it at 100 miles per hour. He'd put it in front of his crotch and call it his little friend. Instead, Duke just shoots until he gets knocked unconscious for 4 hours. Seems like a long time and some major shit would happen during an alien invasion, but whatever. You make your way through more of what I still think is meant to be Duke's complex, get shrunk by alien magic and start driving an RC through the casino. There's no tension here. No time limit. I'm just Duke, but in a vehicle and small for some reason that doesn't make a difference. There's a feeble attempt to add excitement with some explosions, which is mildly funny when you realise they must have been tiny considering how small Duke is. If you're wondering, the driving controls are terrible, so it's a slight relief that you get to do some platforming before doing some more driving. You finally get to the end of the casino and find the twins who have somehow survived. It would have been funny if the twins were doing cool shit and were actually the brains and brawn behind fighting off the aliens, but they did it in an airheaded manner. Duke just constantly failing, but the twins come along to accidentally solve the problem and Duke gets the credit. Instead, they're just dullards who get teleported away, which makes Duke noticeably angry.
Not my babes, not in my town! You alien motherfuckers are gonna pay for this!
Remember this. So to get them back, you have to go back through the casino. Ugh. Making it back to the entrance, General Graves says the president was wrong, and that the aliens have a wormhole powered by generators from the Hoover Dam that's allowing aliens to pour in. But also, somehow that doesn't matter because they've taken our women, who are being held in the Duke Dome. So that's where they're sending you first. We leave the casino to get assaulted with references to Gears of War and Halo.
I just got back from helping my friend find his wife. Christ, what a fucking pussy.
Duke, we've got your green power armor over here and ready to go.
Power armor is for pussies.
Well, okay,
These are oddly aggressive swipes at other games with references that aren't really parodies or jokes. They're just references. It's possible to do parody and references to existing media and have it age well. Airplane is one of the most beloved comedies of all time, and most people don't know it's a parody of a movie called 0 Hour.
You ever been in the cockpit before?
No, sir. I've never been up in a plane before.
You ever seen a grown man naked?
Comedy is the genre most at risk of aging poorly, but if your joke relies on knowing a reference to something that will be irrelevant within months, never mind years, you're not even giving it a chance. Plus, those are certainly some games that Duke Nukem is ill-positioned to mock, what with their critical acclaim and commercial success long before and after DNF released. DNF also has all the trappings of the modern FPS design that it's mocking, like having turret sections, infinite ammo caches, and 2 weapon slots, but acts like it's better than them. Why? If you think they're risible, why are you copying their riz? Oh, quick correction, if you go into the options menu, you can have 4 weapon slots, so that's a second option that you have to change if you decide to torture yourself with this game. The 4 guns option was a PC change they patched in later, so that wasn't even in the base game. What were they doing with this game? Having the ability to add that but not thinking to do so before release is ridiculous. How are you even supposed to complete the game with 2 weapon slots? Adding it later might have also messed with the game balance because the combat is rather easy but with random difficulty spikes. Not that it matters considering how little combat there is. For example, we do some Valve-style physics puzzles, which is a nice change of pace from everything else that absolutely sucks. Even though later in the game, Duke says he hates Valve puzzles because of course they take a swing at the true king of FPS games. They're lucky they even get to be sold on their store. After that, we get a brief glimpse of the alien queen we'll be fighting later before falling into the hive, a genuinely disturbing area where there are women constantly moaning in pain. Initially I thought this was going to be a bait and switch and they're actually moaning with pleasure, but no, they're in pain. There's no joke. I cannot overemphasize how much of a tone shift this is. Outside of a Dead Space reference, there's no levity. You find the twins who are begging to be free, to which Duke says,
Looks like you're fucked.
Before they explode. Remember Duke angrily shouting because they took our women?
Not my babes, not in my town! Looks like you're fucked.
Perhaps it's harsh to judge a rushed game. Perhaps it's the height of arrogance to assume you can improve upon someone else's art. Perhaps it's even rude to assume that being able to rewrite something with the benefit of hindsight makes it easy to do so in the moment. All of that is true. But it's also fun, so I'm going to do it. Himbos are a thing now. It would have been a bit ahead of its time, but having Duke be a well-meaning big strong doofus could have worked. You wouldn't even have to change much. Instead of being told where he's going, you could have had the general say, "The aliens have invaded Hoover Dam, and you need to go there and blow up the generators or we're all doomed." Also, they've taken the women to the Duke Dome. "I think we both know where you should go first," and Duke says, "You're goddamn right," and heads straight to the Duke Dome. Instead, we get the Duke that says,
Looks like you're fucked.
slap an alien memory, max ego increase, Duke says, "Got milk." I am straight up not having a good time. You escape the hive and fight the alien queen using the good old shoot then take cover routine until she stops living in a rather bland fashion. Imagine if instead you fought the alien queen, it does nothing, then the twins accidentally make the scoreboard fall and kill her, for which Duke gets the credit. But there I go trying to rewrite this into an enjoyable experience. Instead, he gets knocked out, again, and hallucinates he's in a strip club. Are there some fun reality warps and impossible scenes because it's a hallucination and they can do what they want? Nope. They've even put up some oddly respectful and unfunny rules for the strip club. You can play video poker, which is outdated since we have Balatro now, or play some air hockey with such bad mechanics I considered Alt F4ing after the first point when I realised it wouldn't let me leave until either me or the NPC won. There's plenty of browser-based air hockey games that do a better job than this, probably because they didn't make the mistake of putting it in first person, so every time you make a move the camera moves with you, meaning you need to immediately pull back to reorient yourself to even know where the puck went. I was overjoyed when the game ended at 7 points, since I was convinced it would go to 10, and each extra point after the first felt like 10,000 years of torture. Maybe that's why those NPCs were watching air hockey on TV. Televised torture is ethically awful, but makes great viewing, hence the popularity of Love Island.
Licked at it or whatever, and
to end the level, you're meant to be finding some popcorn, a vibrator, and a condom so a stripper will give you a striptease. See, this is different to finding keycards because they're called something else, and it's encouraging you to explore this dingy club with, of course, nothing worth exploring. They draw the line at letting Duke in the women's bathroom, and of course there's nothing for getting Duke on the stripper pole. Wouldn't want him to appear silly or feminine or have some fun in this comedic video game. After finding the items, you're rewarded with a striptease. Could have had a fun switcheroo by having the female stripper swap with a male one, or an alien, or a better game, but no. Instead, the striptease plays out in full, and Duke wakes up to another turret section on the way to the top of Duke Burger. On your way through, you get shrunk once again so you can do some platforming and rescue a lady who names her favourite pie flavours.
Cherry, blueberry, 3.14, something. Oh, that flavor's best.
This made me push a short expulsion of air through my nose, which I'll count as the second laugh of the game. Fight some rats. Get back to full size, get to the roof, and get picked up for another turret section, followed by another vehicle section. Just desperately trying to avoid first-person shooting in this first-person shooter. This driving goes on for about 20 minutes before I get to a jump I cannot make. The jumps were getting increasingly difficult before this, which had its upside in being an actual challenge. But this seemed impossible, so impossible that I remembered some games have issues with frame rates being tied to certain mechanics, so I decided to turn on VSync and it broke the game. And let me tell you, I was ecstatic. The perfect excuse to stop. I was so hopeful this ruined the game and I could cease the psychic damage I was inflicting upon myself. Unfortunately, turns out it was a frame rate issue, so that's the cinematic filter, 4 weapon slots, and VSync that you need to change in the menu before you start playing if you want to enjoy this game. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to finish the next jumps if I hadn't changed it, but now they're absurdly easy. Turns out the previous jumps had some challenge and engagement by accident. Shame the rest of the game wasn't accidentally brilliant. It's actually unfortunate how few bugs and glitches there are. There's a certain joy to be found in breaking a game. Chaos in games can be great. You of course don't want too much, but a touch of it can lead to greatness. There's no chaos to be found in DNF. It's so structured and safe it's dull. Just sawtooths, loading screens, and invisible walls to make sure you're having your mandatory fun. More driving until you run out of fuel as an excuse to kill some more enemies. There's a slight difficulty spike here with a spaceship that arrives unexpectedly and impolitely kills you immediately. In most games this wouldn't be too bad, but at this point I fear dying from the enemies because it means I have to replay more of this game, and I'd rather replay my worst life experiences. Although maybe not, since that does now include that air hockey minigame. Ride a minecart back to the truck and finally make your way to the dam. The president chews you out, and you get to just stand there and take it, because him and his guards are invincible and only leave when you stop looking at them, because despite their tough talk, they're socially awkward. A wild battle lord appears, you RPG him, then juggle punch his balls until he collapses, at which point we get to my third and final laugh of the game, when Duke says,
Get off my dam.
It was so pathetic that I couldn't help but laugh. That's not a one-liner, why did he say that? He didn't even fall off the dam. But you do, via rappel rope, so you can get inside the dam and blow up the generators. Explore this hallway, congratulations, it's a dead end. Go back the correct way. There's a soldier that's a bit rattled and wants backup, and Duke declares they don't need backup because he's the backup, which doesn't reassure him.
Okay, Duke.
This is how they should have written Duke's character throughout, rather than having everyone jerk him off over how great he is. You get access to a freeze gun and get sent into yet another boring shootout. I'm done. Fuck this game. It's so bad. It gave me a freeze gun, and it's less fun than the other guns. And the other guns aren't a barrel of laughs either. Actually, a physical barrel of laughs could have been a funny weapon. Could have been an AoE stun because it causes enemies to compulsively laugh. But there I go trying to manifest an enjoyable game. DNF broke me. I don't usually play bad games. I'm not a professional critic with an obligation to write up a review each week. If a game sucks, I don't play it. I have no willpower. I need good games to keep me going. They say God gives his hardest challenges to his toughest warriors. I was given the challenge of finishing DNF, but much like George Broussard, I failed what should have been a simple task. So the rest of this footage is courtesy of the YouTuber Bollocks. Thank you for doing what I could not. As a bonus, this doesn't have the make the game look worse filter, so enjoy that. Duke drives a forklift and says, "Fork you," to enemies. Meh, not the worst. Feels like they knew the combat was bad enough they couldn't get away with yet another arena with waves of enemies and remembered they had vehicle mechanics, so screw it. Duke is forklift certified now. You sabotage the generators after an underwater section. Oh, so sad I missed out on playing that. Duke gets pushed out of the dam as it explodes and has to be revived. Again, easily could have been flipped to have Duke constantly needing saving and messing up the actual plan with his overconfidence. Instead, we get to wake up in time to fight the final boss, which is just the same boss fight from the start but with waves of little enemies. I expected so little, and yet this is still a crap ending. The game ends with Duke pissing on the cycloid's brain, a reference to the development process of this game. The final scenes are a nuke going off and referencing the nuke scene in the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare, once again comparing itself to a much better FPS. Then Duke says that's a shit ending, so he's not dead. I actually like that. Deciding he's too cool to die feels like what a better written version of Duke would do. A flicker of a glimpse of a timeline where they had the space to write more than the scraps of a spec script. Then he has a press conference and says he's gonna run for president. I won't blame the game for that not aging well. They couldn't have predicted America's political trajectory making Duke Nukem seem like the better choice just by being under the age of 75. And that's it. Duke walks off stage and ends the franchise. 14 years of build-up to produce an outrated, mediocre at best FPS. A sequel so terrible, it killed the franchise of what was once one of the biggest names in gaming. I'm not even going to bother saying anything about the DLC. I don't care. Part of being a professional is having standards, and with an output rate of a blistering one video every month and a half-ish, I get to have the standards of a typical YouTuber and decide that looking after my mental health is more important than thinking any more about this game. Dragging its corpse out of the ground to show everyone it is in fact the stinkiest sequel to ever live has the downside that I've had to spend far too long smelling it. It can go back in the ground where it belongs.
Oh, I don't know what I expected.
So, is it the worst video game sequel ever made? Probably, but I don't think this is a hill I'm willing to die on. After all, it's got some stiff competition. Devil May Cry 2 is notoriously bad, but at least it didn't kill off its franchise. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts did seemingly kill its franchise, but it at least reviewed okay, and you can still enjoy it for what it is. If anything, it was ahead of its time, with Tears of the Kingdom using similar mechanics and getting praised for it. It also didn't have that big of a drop-off compared to DNF, which has one of the highest drop-offs in Metacritic score compared to its predecessor. In fact, If you were to go through Wikipedia's list of video game sequels, take the Metacritic scores of them and their predecessors, put them in a spreadsheet and then compare and rank them, DNF makes the top 10. Though I don't know why you would do that, since it would take about 30 hours and would be a waste of time even if I hadn't already done it and delayed this video for a week. So I'm going to talk about it, otherwise why did I do that? Here's the full top 10 worst video game sequels by this terrible metric, and here's the top 10 best video game sequels. These are utterly meaningless and I have wasted my life. Resident Evil has some questionable sequels, but they never managed to kill the series despite some good efforts. Resident Evil 6 is an over-the-top action game in a campy horror franchise with characters that claim to be the likes of Leon Kennedy, but act like a knockoff action hero. Changes in how the characters act is a common talking point of a bad sequel, but it's the lack of change that works against Duke. The ultimate tragedy of DNF is that whilst the gameplay is awful, story and jokes-wise, it's actually pretty faithful to the rest of the Duke Nukem games. The problem being that the story and jokes from those games did not age well. He was always just a pop culture referencing womanizer, with one-liners that were at best cheesy and at worst like something you'd stutter out when you can't think of anything better but you know you have to say something because it's expected of you.
My damn.
But, if nothing else, DNF is still an FPS, which is a sign of how bad it is that one of the few things I can say in its favour is at least it's the expected genre, which is more than can be said of Duke Nukem Critical Mass, a 2D platformer that has the 55th lowest Metacritic score of all time, and makes me question if video game preservation is in fact worthwhile, or if some games are too cursed to be allowed to exist. Oh look! Another point in DNF's favour, it's not the worst Duke Nukem game. Wait, is DNF the same genre? Technically, Duke Nukem 3D is what we would now consider a boomer shooter, whereas DNF is a modern FPS in all the worst ways. So maybe let's not say that in its favour and continue to call it shit. Speaking of modern FPS, Overwatch 2 is a good candidate for worst sequel, since it's an inferior game to the original and the original version is no longer playable. However, just because they slapped a 2 on the end doesn't make it a sequel, just an incredibly bad forced update to a live service game. And I say you can't play the original, but they're currently testing going back to 6v6 rather than 5v5, so I guess that was a full circle of a development cycle where they ended up back where they started, which is pretty typical of Activision Blizzard. Like with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which is another good contender for worst sequel. But they managed to remake the first two and brought some life back to the series that showed it isn't dead and could be continued. You know, if Activision Blizzard hadn't cancelled the 3 and 4 remake so that the developer could go work in the Call of Duty content mines because Call of Duty had a bad year and actually lost money, so we'd best take this developer who made us money and put them on the failing project because I'm Bobby Goddamn Kotick and I'm a very smart business guy who threatened to have an employee killed. That's not even a joke. How can he be mad when people Photoshop devil horns on him when he is unashamedly evil, and again, no, that's not a joke. He has come out and said that it makes it hard for him to date women as though his sheer overwhelming aura of spite wouldn't do the trick. Payday 3 has been a shit show. Had an overwhelmingly negative rating on Steam. I didn't even know that was a possible rating. It has about 800 concurrent players at the moment, whereas Payday 2 still has about 20,000. But it's a bit early to tell with Payday 3. They booted out their CEO and plan to continue supporting the game, so it's got a chance, whereas DNF is a proven product that had more than enough time to do it right. I haven't gone over the development of the game too much, so if you're unfamiliar with its bizarre development history, I recommend Matt McMuscle's video on the subject. But as a quick summary, it was meant to come out in 1998, but the head of 3D Realms, George Broussard, wanted to use the Quake 2 engine instead. Then there were a series of takeovers that might explain why there were no updates until 2001, when there was a trailer, followed by more silence. Then, in 2003, Take-Two announced it wouldn't be released that year, and George said that Take-Two needs to shut the fuck up. Yes, that's an actual quote. 3D Realms employees would eventually leave the company as they weren't being paid well and had little to show on their CVs. After another 9 years, the studio inevitably ran out of money to finish the game, made a deal with the devil, and finally pushed out what we now know as Duke Nukem Forever in 2011. As is often the case with bad games, it's not so much the devs being bad at their job, so much as one or two bosses being bad at their jobs, leading to the devs not having the time to put out a finished product. The development time doesn't even matter though. No one cared about Team Fortress 2's development time after it came out because it was good, divorced from the context in which it came about, with no bias towards the length of its development cycle, its contemporaries, or the history of the franchise. It's just a bad game. If anything, the context makes it better. Games development is taking longer and longer, with Part 2 of a remake taking 4 years to come out being a sign of efficient development. We've seen more and more examples of games with decade or longer development cycles coming out to mediocre at best reviews. DNF was simply the first high-profile example of this happening, and at a time when fewer games were coming out. Now these games release to exasperated sighs and a hope that the next one will be better. Times change, especially when you consider that DNF was considered vaporware within 5 years of announcement, a development time that would be considered average now. Development time doesn't matter. What matters is the end result, which in this case is a game so bad it ended a franchise. And last but not least, the final nail in the coffin that I think makes DNF take the title of worst video game sequel is because of something that came out recently. The leaked 2001 build of Duke Nukem Forever. Leaked in May 2022, there's now an effort to restore it to a fully playable state, which isn't as crazy as it sounds since the build looks surprisingly good. It has physics interactions that wouldn't be seen until Half-Life 2 released 5 years later. Look at the glass physics in this build. The pinball machine looks to have better physics than the 2011 version. Someone in the comments of the video on screen, for which there's a link in the description, pointed out that Duke says the line,
"Remember kids, I'm a professional. Don't try this at school."
just 2 years after Columbine. And yeah, today's school shooting jokes in America are as routine as, well. But this was when emotions were still high. There was hope that gun control would actually happen, and jokes like that could have easily been considered tasteless. That's much closer to the kind of edgy humour that would age poorly but be legendary for the time, even if it would be fairly mundane now. However, I'll always advocate for game restoration and preservation. Mostly. So I wish them all the best in reviving that build. It already looks better than the 2011 version, though that's such a low bar it almost sounds like an insult. In comparison, DNF 2011 was disappointing, but time has only made it look even worse. The 2001 build leaking has allowed people to see what could have been. DNF 2001 was filet mignon 10 minutes away from being perfectly cooked that got thrown in the bin because it wasn't going to be served with the compound butter the restaurant across the street just came out with. DNF 2011 is a single uncooked egg served on a plate that hurls insults at you, and you're expected to appreciate you were given a plate. So to wrap up this meltdown, I guess I've changed my mind. I am dying on this hill. Duke Nukem Forever 2011 is the worst video game sequel ever made. They made shit and expected you not to notice it stinks. Rest in piss, you deserve nothing more.
Hail to the king, baby.